Thank you for visiting this limited series. The infection was initially mild, my small town city council run, the toxic American pandemic response, and what both mean for the future of the country, written by Heather Christina Schmidt. You can view the entire series now on schmidttalks.com or subscribe to get it sent in parts to your email box weekly.
As it turned out, since my loss, the mismanagement of health, housing, COVID, and everything in between, has been a complete disaster. Less than 2 years later, we have more than double the community members dead of the virus, and a paltry vaccination rate by zip code compared to other areas of California. We also have a moratorium now meant to stifle any building of newer, affordable, housing, which has resulted in both crime and homelessness rising exponentially since the election. The real kicker is that the moratorium is meant to stop the very type of housing my opponent spoke in favor of, both times he ran. When the CDC changed their masking guidance in May 2021, and the state of California aligned alongside it in June, our city took it a step further and made masks optional for everyone. Aghast, and in horror, I contacted everyone on the city council, one of whom claims to be a nurse, asking why? How? What justification could there be when the rules clearly stated only the vaccinated could remove their masks? Our city claims to be family-friendly, and this would only increase disease spread and hurt our lower-wage and frontline healthcare workers. How could a nurse, and her colleagues, sign on to this? No one ever responded. As the Delta variant, and later Omicron, ripped through the community, they continued to ignore my calls, emails, and requests. I drove by city-sponsored events to see that no mobile vaccine clinic had been called to come from the county. I watched in horror as city after city shut down when Omicron hit, only for our city to insist on staying open, and to outright lie when they had outbreaks. How many times does the senior center need to change the carpeting in a year's time? It's this type of do-nothing, ignore everyone, attitude that is pervasive to the city council, and why I say that in spite of voter registration data or general presence of support, our community is, by and large, conservative. Conservative values are more than a party or an ideology, they are a way of life. You could have voted for Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton, but still clicked the ticker on every ideologically Republican-valued candidate down the line. And we were lying to ourselves if we don't admit the aforementioned aren't pretty right-of-center politicians anyway. This is what voters in this district believe in, and are like. I realize that now. A progressive appearance slathered over a regressive and conservative reality. This is the community I was running for city council in, and exactly why my radical ideas of taking care of each other, and lifting the entire community into a higher quality of life, was a losing strategy. Many homes have those catchy signs on their yards that say "In this house we believe," while the people within them respond to an incident of outright racism at the high school with the old line "Kids will be kids." They vote for leaders that do anything but lead, deferring to council members that effectively show they'll take a seat and button their mouths. That'll do nothing and point the finger at the county or state or personal responsibility when it's time to hold someone accountable for a major problem in the community, of which there are many. Those that came out to vote in my district in particular seems by and large perfectly content to bury their heads in the ground of their finely manicured lawns, ignoring the struggles of the other tens of thousands of residents that live in this city. So long as it doesn't affect them, and they don't have to hear about it. At the same time, you almost have to understand, at least in some sense, because with such a high cost of living, and the need to commute to afford living in the city, they're fundamentally too busy to care. Maybe that's the point. As it turns out, even the most progressive public health advocates at the beginning of the pandemic were more than excited to take off their masks in stores when little kids were around. When the Delta variant began to rip through our unvaccinated populations, and everyone realized that even the vaccinated could still transmit COVID to others, well after the election was over, middle-aged suburban women, and men in Oakleys with big trucks and a clear compensatory tendency, proudly talked online about being the only ones in the stores that had taken off their masks just yet. That number of unmasked grew, as did COVID cases, and these people whose profile pictures were still of them getting their vaccine, wearing a shirt that said something like "I believe in science," with the Biden-Harris logo still overlaid on the photo, coined the phrase "I did my part, if you're unvaccinated that's on you." My city is like the apex where blue MAGA and red MAGA meet. Where every street is a mix of hard-to-the-right voters that still have their Trump and Let's Go Brandon flags up in their lawns, and soft-to-the-right Democrats that voted for Biden but still watch Fox News and worship at the altar of first responder culture. And yet caught in the middle of it all, holding the entire community up and making it run, are the working class, swelling our low-paying jobs and privileged attitudes with a smile, while working so many jobs just to put food on the table and pay rent they don't have the time to vote, let alone do anything else. And this is how my opponent, a hard-right Republican, masterfully manipulated the public into thinking I was some cop-hating liberal that would take their guns and bastardize the community. While I was talking about the pandemic and masks over Zoom, this guy was going door to door telling people I wanted to defund the police and soon thereafter turn our city into one where people were shackled by socialism, forced to wear burlap sacks and live in a communal shanty while paying allegiance daily to a dark Stalin-esque overlord. While I did take the endorsement from the local Democrats, this plus a check for a couple $100 and my name on a list of candidates they had endorsed, was the length of support I received from them. And I always made clear that their defund the police jargon was a losing policy, in both politics and practice. In truth, my own political philosophy can be best described as nuanced. I don't believe in defunding the police, but I do believe that Black Lives Matter. I'm not a fan of groups or clubs. And as I said, I stand by the working class and the struggles of others more with empathy and understanding and a commitment to public health and quality of life, above anything else. In many ways, I agree with the Democratic Party's positions, but in many ways I also do not. Certainly, what I disagree with them on is the idea that an individual within the party cannot have varied views on things, that everyone must fall in line, as if they cannot win elections without total and utter allegiance to the official talking points. Years ago, when I first graduated college, I worked for the Democratic Party, as well as on several campaigns, as local as water board and as national as presidential primary. Stupidly, I forgot just how much like their nemesis they truly are. Backbiting and embroiled in identity politics, the Democrats on the largest and equally smallest scales tend to shun anyone that is not completely in line with their philosophies. To be clear, this is just as authoritarian as the MAGA GOP. Where blue MAGA meets red MAGA. They aren't even philosophies espoused in a political party, though, so much as they are a body of non-thinking ideologues. It's no wonder they get into office and are unable to ever actually accomplish anything. To remain in with the in crowd they have to toe the party line, or face the consequences. Festering in the back of my mind for the entire campaign was the memory of the last job I did for the local Democrats, before going back to college and then graduate school, then moving on to be a private citizen, as a stay-at-home mom and writer. It was a pre-candidacy hit piece on a local Democrat, pulling up personal anecdotes of sketchy behavior, old cable bills, and basically anything I could get my hands on to convince this guy not to run for office in a primary against a more well-known, well-liked candidate. All because he was not 100% in line with the party's views. After spending weeks putting this piece together, I never called the committee back when they tried to contract me for another job. I couldn't live with the idea that I was going to be a part of this type of underhanded, backbiting operation. So upon taking their support in my own campaign, I knew I would have to keep it at an arm's length. More than anything, when old faces and familiar names began to crop up, I knew it was in my own best interest to remain somewhat neutral. At least with the locals. I wanted to impact change in my community, and do a service to the people. This was my agenda. Not get sucked into petty party politics and infighting. COVID allowed me to largely get away with doing that, at least for a time. I was able to stay above the fray until just after the election. Of course, this didn't prevent me from losing. And once the election had passed, all the toxic, nuclear waste bubbled to the surface anyway. What came only after I lost, I never could have foreseen.
Keep going to continue. The infection was initially mild, my small town city council run, the toxic American pandemic response, and what both mean for the future of the country, written by Heather Christina Schmidt, or come back next week for the next installation on schmidttalks.com. Thank you to our sponsors, and subscribers like you. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay aware.